So hey everyone, welcome to the Vienna Whyte Roundtable Season 1, Episode 6, I think. I really hope it's 6. I'm your host, Millie Rouge, and today we have a very fun segment today. This is actually our first roundtable talk that is not related to music and is completely different. So I'm super excited to be talking to 3 upcoming to-be nurses today. So I'm going to introduce our first guest, Haley. Haley, can you say hi to the camera?
Hi, my name is Haley. I'm a third-year nursing student. I'm here because I know Michelle, and I also know Izzy and Charlotte, and I'm kind of like, the middle between all of them. I kind of connected them. Kind of. So.
You did. Take the credit. Take the credit. Okay, Izzy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, guys. My name is Izzy. I, like Charlotte and Haley, am finishing up my 3rd year of nursing school. And me and Charlotte do a podcast together called Hey Nurse Podcast. And I think that, along with knowing Haley, is kind of how we connected with Millie Rouge.
Yeah, that's how I found through Haley, but then I started getting interested in hearing about your guys' podcast, which is really cool because I am a huge fan of podcasts, so I love it.
Well, thanks for listening to us.
Yeah, no worries. And Charlotte, do you want to give us your introduction about yourself?
Yes, so my name is Charlotte. I, like Haley and Izzy, we're just finishing up our 3rd year of nursing school. Has been a little bit interrupted by some current events that I'm sure everyone is familiar with, but through the hard work of the nursing faculty, we are going to be on track to our 4th year starting in September. And Izzy and I have a podcast together at Hey Nurse, and that's about it.
Yeah.
I'm excited to be here.
Beautiful. Let's actually talk a little bit before we start in the questions. Let's talk about your podcast. How long have you ladies been, I know it's pretty new, I think, the podcast. Can you talk a little bit more about it?
Yeah. So whenever I first started nursing school in my 1st year, I had wanted to start a podcast, but I didn't know anybody, and it's 1st year nursing, you don't really know anything, so there's not a ton to talk about. And then Izzy and I were kind of collaborators in many ways. We are doing an honors research project together. We are in all of the same clinical groups, all of the same classes. We essentially just are always connected at the hip. So I was like, well, if I'm going to do it with anyone, why not have it be Izzy? We're together all the time anyway.
Why not your conjoined twin? Yeah.
Right. And we talk a lot just generally. So I was like, do you want to start a podcast? And she was like, yeah.
Cool. And where can we find the podcast?
Right now we are on Apple and Google Podcasts.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, we kind of just figured we already talk so much between ourselves and our other nursing school friends. We were like, maybe other people would want to hear what we have to say, because we have some pretty wild conversations. That's kind of where it started. And I already had a little bit of experience dabbling in the world of, I guess, social media, because I had started a nursing blog previous to that. And a podcast is a surprisingly easy way to get your ideas and your stuff out there. So it was kind of the perfect thing for us. We were if we're going to talk anyway, we might as well record it.
Yeah, might as well get the views.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. Yeah. I really love that. So basically our topic for today is going to be day in the life of a nursing student, essentially is what it is, because I'm going to be asking a bunch of different aspects about nursing. So to start it off, I just kind of want to just ease into it, and I'll let you ladies kind of, whoever wants to start first, go for it. But we'll get through all of you basically through today for this question. So what made you guys in general want to be a nurse? Kind of take us through the process of what made you want to become this profession. So whoever wants to start first.
Haley, you can start.
Oh, okay. We've had this question before, actually.
Yeah, everyone. This question is asked across the board. Yeah, everywhere.
Well, I went into from high school, I went straight into university, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go into sciences. It's safe, whatever. So I did that for 1 year, and then I realized I kind of want to go into nursing. I think it's really cool. I mean, you get to help people, and I was always in the restaurant industry, so I kind of liked that interaction with people. But then I realized how hard it was to get into nursing. So I had to take another year just to upgrade my grades, because I was not doing so hot in my 1st year. So then once I eventually got in, that just kind of started, and I didn't really know if it was going to be for me, but the more I went through it, the more I loved it. So Yeah,
that
it kind
totally
of just
makes
worked
sense.
out.
Yeah, and I knowing Haley, like as just her friend, I think there's certain quality traits that just make someone a nurse, and I think she like, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but I think she just has those traits. Like I could never care about a person as much as Haley probably could. Like,
aw, Haley. No, you're totally right. Haley is like
Haley's
the
a dope,
cutest little
yeah,
right?
most caring like mom out there.
Well, like anytime we'll like go somewhere, I'm like, does anyone have this? And Haley's like, yeah, I got it. Like, let me pull it out. So she's meant to be a nurse.
And sanitizer at the bar, guys.
yeah.
Absolutely. What about you, Izzy? What kind of made you want to go into the nursing field?
Well, I kind of always knew I wanted to go into a healthcare field just because it's so cliche, but I wanted to help people. That's kind of what everyone always says.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be a part of an essential service. That was something that I thought would give me a lot of, I guess, meaning to the work that I do. And I always knew that I wanted to be in a profession where I would get to interact with people, like Haley was saying, and kind of just be constantly in like a changing environment and be challenged. And so initially out of high school, also like Haley, I went into the science program because I wasn't 100% sure, I guess, of what kind of healthcare job I wanted. I was kind of leaning towards medicine. But then during my first year of sciences, I was like, I don't know if I want to like continue this all the way through with like the hopes of getting into medicine. And I started looking into nursing, and the nursing role really started to interest me. So I talked to an advisor about how I could transfer into the nursing program. And she basically said, like, in sciences, it's super hard to transfer into nursing because the courses are so hard and the nursing is so competitive. You have to have a really high GPA. So she encouraged me to drop out of university and use my high school marks, but I didn't want to do that because I was already like halfway through the year. So I just dropped the courses that I knew were going to be really, really hard, and I kept the courses I knew I could be really successful in so I could boost my GPA. I entered nursing and I loved it as soon as I was in it. Obviously, it was really hard work, but I've always been really interested with the human body and human sciences. So I loved learning about that in my first year. I loved learning all the clinical skills. And I'm really excited to get out in the fields soon here and
start
be
actually
working.
doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And what about you, Charlotte? What's kind of your background with it?
Yeah, so I have a little bit of a different background than Izzy and Haley just because I am a little bit older and I was out of school longer. So I went back and did some upgrading. Essentially, like Haley, I'd worked in the service industry for too many years. I was just like over it, knew that I wanted to do something different with my life. And I actually got a piece of advice from my grandfather when I was younger, just like maybe around like 18, 19. And he was always like, do something that like you can be a woman and support yourself, and something that's going to like empower you essentially to like support yourself in your own life.
Wow.
And obviously when you're a kid, you just kind of, oh yeah, whatever. But then as you get a little bit older, you're kind of like, wait a second, that's actually a really sound piece of advice. And then so exploring what I wanted to do, I stumbled upon nursing, and it just kind of like, it was like a light bulb in my head. And I just went from there.
That's so cool. Wow, your grandpa's the coolest. I love that your grandpa gave you that advice.
Isn't that great advice?
So cool.
Like, yeah,
well, usually you'd expect that from like your grandma or like your mom, but the fact that your grandpa was like, no, like do it yourself.
Yeah.
Be who you are. Like that's really cool. I love that.
Yes. Yeah.
What element about nursing kind of makes you the most nervous or like scares you the most that you might have to deal with once you start the job?
I think in today's climate, there's a lot on top of not just being a brand new nurse. There's also the stress of entering a field where there might not even be a job waiting for you because of the impending cuts and changes to the provincial system that we're facing right now. Also on top of everything else that's going on with the strain on our system. It is scary. I personally, it is intimidating. It's something that I have thought of. Yeah, leaving nursing school, knowing that like, okay, I technically have the tools that should be sufficient enough to like start this job, but it's so much bigger than that.
Yeah. It's like kind of like the fear of the unknown. Like you're never really knowing what's going to happen after you're done. Yeah. What about you two ladies? What do you think? What scares you kind of the most?
I think definitely that as well, for sure. But also just with like what's going on right now. Like obviously as nursing students, we want to be helping and we want to be there. But I couldn't even imagine like actually doing it and like having to take those extra precautions. Like what if we had kids at home, and like you have to think about that too. Like it's, obviously you want to be the most helpful and caring person that you can be in that situation, but like they're superheroes, man. I don't even know how they do it. Like,
no,
it's crazy to think of that we have to be in those shoes one day, you know, like
me.
Yeah, me.
Are you
You're
sure?
gonna trust me to be doing this? Are you sure about that? Yeah.
I think that's my biggest fear.
Right now, it's a super intimidating time as nursing students because we're entering the field of nursing into like a pandemic. So it's very intimidating. And even besides that, like nursing already, the nursing role is already a huge responsibility. And when, you know, anytime that you're entering a new job or a new career, even with all the training in the world, in a very real sense, you have no idea what you're doing, right? That's with any job. But the difference with nursing is that you're experiencing those feelings and that imposter syndrome and that still kind of getting your gripping, but you have human lives in your hand. So it's very intimidating because it's like you can't make a mistake, you can't miss something, you can't afford to have those learning slip-ups. And if you do have those learning slip-ups, which are bound to happen, and they happen to every nurse even throughout their entire career, it has a huge emotional impact on you. And so there's a huge fear associated with that. And a lot of people don't know the responsibility that nurses actually have and the liability that they have. Because like if, let's say, a physician writes a prescription for a medication that isn't appropriate for the patient and it's not the right dosage or whatever it might be, if the nurse administers that to the patient, the nurse is liable for that. It's because they have a responsibility to be double checking physicians' orders, things like they're the last line of defense because they're the one administering it to the patient. So a lot of people don't understand that huge liability falls on the nurse's shoulder. And there's just so much to nursing. There's so much knowledge. There's such, you know, not all of it can be covered in nursing school. A lot of it you have to learn along the way. And so it's very intimidating to be thrown into nursing knowing that you still have so much to learn and so many skills that still need to be practiced.
And you really don't want to make mistakes, but you're bound to make mistakes. I think that would be, for me, I'm not a nurse obviously, but the most terrifying thing is potentially making a mistake and harming someone's life. Like I think that's, to me, that would be the most scary thing. But absolutely, I totally agree with everything you guys said. Can you guys describe to me a typical day in nursing school and what it kind of looks like for someone who's never, like myself, really known? Like I've heard from Haley a little bit, but take me through like a typical day, what it would look like.
Honestly, every day is different.
Like,
it's like like in our third year, every 4 to 6 weeks we were in a different placement. So it's like everything's so different. Even compared to like our first 2 years, we do a lot of like just in class, like no clinicals, but then the second year our clinical starts. And then the third year it's pretty much all clinical. So,
third year we just had classes on Monday.
Exactly. So like literally just Mondays would be classes. And then usually
fourth year is basically completely clinical, just like your final preceptorship, a leadership clinical. Like what Haley was saying, it really is year dependent too, because the first year especially, it's very heavy with classes. The second year, once you start getting into the more clinical classes, you also have labs. You might be doing simulation labs where you're working with like these really high fidelity, expensive dummies basically to be practicing your skills on, because you're not quite safe to be doing it on humans yet. And then as you progress into like your second year, third year, fourth year, you start entering the clinical spaces. And then really your day ranges a lot depending on what clinical area you're in. And also you could be in a morning shift, you could be there till 10 p.m. at night. It really varies. So you don't really have normal hours either.
So like if we were in like an acute placement, so that's like being at the hospital, you're either on days or nights. I was so lucky to have all days for all my so pretty much get up at like 5:30 ish.
You guys had to be on the unit at 6:30. Hey,
we had to be on the unit at 6:30 in the morning when it was -50 outside. So it sucked. So we get up super early, honestly, go straight to the hospital, just pray that the day goes okay. And then you're there until probably like 3:30. So you're there for a good chunk of the day. By the time you get home, you're either doing like patient research or studying for something else, trying to balance a nice lifestyle by actually eating something healthy or working out or spending time with friends and family. But then you go to bed and have to do it all over again for like 4 days a week.
Yeah. For the rest of your life.
It's a lot, especially when it's like you're doing the hard work as a student, and like you wake up, that alarm goes off at 5 a.m. and you're like, I'm not being paid for this. I'm actually paying to do it. And you have to get out of bed and spend a long day on the unit. Yeah. And we're even expected on days where we don't have clinical to prepare for the week. We have to go to the hospital on our own time and get our patient research done.
Oh.
So that's another thing that we have to do as nursing students. And there's obviously huge time commitments as well in the first couple of years, because the course load is very heavy and it's very intense. So at least for me, like in my first year, we'd be in class all day and I'd probably go home and study sometimes until like the early hours of the morning, which isn't healthy, but that's kind of what I had to do to get by in classes like medical microbiology and pharmacology and anatomy, physiology, pathophysiology, like those really heavy classes.
Yeah.
I
but
think
it is
Charlotte
stuff you will need to know, right? Like I think with some courses, like they give you a bunch of information that you may use and you're like, I might use this, but most likely not. But I think with nursing, that's the thing, is that all the stuff you do learn, I feel like most of it will actually be applied to what you're actually going to do, which is good because you're not wasting your money, which is just good to know. But
it's more stressful because you're like, I really need to know this.
What tips would you give to someone who's potentially thinking about going to nursing school? What kind of advice would you give someone, maybe like your younger version of yourself? What would you give advice about that?
I think, well, nursing school, province to province, is different. So knowing the prerequisites for each province, if you're planning on applying interprovincially, is really important, because especially if you're in high school and you're sort of trying to guide your classes to where you need to go, you need to make sure that you're on top of everything so that like you're not spending a bunch of time and also money applying to a school that you don't even qualify for. Understanding that like the minimum entry that they put on the website is not like the competitive average that they take. So you really do have to kind of do your homework and explore. I think, you guys can correct me, I think that most schools put up like the competitive averages on their site, like somewhere else, right? Like you can find that.
Yeah, usually schools publish that information.
Yeah, so instead of looking at like the minimum requirements, examine like the competitive averages.
Yeah.
I think nursing is a really awesome profession in that you can go right from high school and get a degree that will essentially provide you with a career, like an awesome career.
Yeah.
So if you do want to go into nursing, it is like it's an amazing profession, but you do have to work really hard to get in. And I think now they're starting to do, because it is so competitive, they've now implemented the interview process similar to like med school, or I think like the other graduate programs like respiratory therapy, I think also have interviews, and those like sort of more specialist programs. We're doing that now in nursing because the competitive average was just so high.
Yeah.
And because like the people person aspect of nursing is so important too. And when you get, you know, when the grades become so inflated in nursing where it's like you need a 95 to get in, then we also need to consider is that having a 95 is not going to make you a good nurse necessarily.
Yeah.
What's the difference between someone with a 93 average and a 95 average? There's not really much difference, but there could be a huge difference in their ability to nurse based on their social skills. So my advice for anyone who's wanting to go into nursing is to get life experience, honestly, and like put yourself in situations where you're interacting with vulnerable populations and you're exposing yourself to the environment. Like if you, like when I was in high school, I volunteered in an emergency department. I did a placement at like an internship placement at a long-term care facility where I worked in recreational therapy. So I was exposed to long-term care. I have a job where I work with kids with disabilities, like any kind of vulnerable population that you can expose yourself to and kind of expand your social skills, I guess, and your experience. Emotional maturity. That's going to be huge for you in nursing school, and it's going to really help your communication skills.
Totally. What tips would you give, Haley?
I would just say same like what they were saying, like immerse yourself in every situation that you can, but also like if you don't have the time, like it's not the end of the world. Like
they don't look at volunteer anything.
No,
they don't look at anything. So
it's more just for
but
yourself.
like social skills are such a huge part of nursing, and it's sad for us to see like in third year still people are like struggling to talk to patients, and it's like we don't like we're too far for that to still be happening sometimes. So
and it's just such a foundational piece of the practice. Like, yeah,
it's hard.
Well, yeah, and I can imagine if you were like a patient who was really struggling and you're really nervous and you're really scared, like having someone that's super sociable or that's had experience in serving or had experience with children, it would be super helpful to have someone who knows and has kind of the right like
just the approach, right?
Yeah,
like the
right
way,
approach.
Yeah.
Whether it's putting someone at ease, being able to just like easily generate small talk in awkward situations where everyone is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
To be able to maybe put a smile on someone's face by cracking a really cheesy joke, which I am like, I do a lot of that. Like you have to.
Yeah.
You have to just be like, your inhibitions just kind of have to come down. You don't have to worry about like, you can't worry about what people think of you in terms of like, oh, if I say something silly, like, you know,
that's not the most important
it
part.
really puts people at ease. People love it, right?
When you're a nurse and you are with people in their most vulnerable moments, in their most exposed moments, in their saddest moments, their happiest moments, you're really in it with them in the trenches during their during the human experience. And you're the person who they're looking at because you're their nurse. You're the one who's there with them like throughout the entire shift. Other healthcare professionals come and go in and out of the room, but they're maybe only there for a few minutes sometimes. So you're really the person that's there for them. So you have to be able to be that pillar and that support for them at that time. And that's difficult because of course, anytime someone's in those kind of like life altering a lot of the time situations, it's challenging to be a support person for someone that you don't know, for essentially a stranger, but you have to have those kind of social skills to be able to be that person, because that's part of your job, that's part of your role as a nurse.
Yeah, I actually remember my dad, he recently had like a very small heart attack in April. But I remember, I think it was one of the drivers or one of the ambulance workers, when we were waiting just to get into the room, like we had to wait quite a while. And I remember I had just gotten to the hospital and I was just like, when you see your parent in such a vulnerable state, it automatically just makes you like super emotional. So I remember just like, and I'm obviously just emotional as is. So I was like just getting super vulnerable.
Totally.
My sister starts crying and she didn't never cry. So I'm crying here. And then, but I just remember, I specifically remember that I believe he was like an EMS driver or one of the workers with them.
Yeah.
But he was just like cracking jokes and but it was appropriate, right? Like he knew the situation, he assessed how it was and was able to kind of cope and be like, this is human, this is bound to happen, but you're gonna get through this, and like we're all here for you, right? So like in that situation, totally, like I could totally see how that's super helpful.
And it's like Izzy and Haley were saying, there unfortunately we do come across a lot of people, and everyone will have this experience in healthcare, and it is unfortunate, but where there is that just sort of gap in care because the communication just it wasn't what it should have been or what it could be.
Yeah, absolutely. I have kind of a funny question now. What TV shows or movies do you think have the worst display of what being a nurse or doctor is actually like?
Grey's Anatomy.
I was gonna say Grey's.
Okay, that's awesome.
I won't watch that show. I think it's so stupid. I hate that show.
I will say that I used to like the show, but once I got into nursing school, name one nurse on Grey's Anatomy.
No.
Name one. Like there's none.
Doctors
and,
portering patients off to like imaging.
Like they get 5 surgeons to like get the patient out of bed and give them their medication. Like no, like surgeons aren't doing the patient care. Like they see their patient for 5 minutes. Like so that
drove me mental.
Lack of portrayal basically is what bothers me about Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah.
But
hey, are you kind of on the same route with Grey's Anatomy?
Honestly, Grey's Anatomy has been my favorite TV show for so long. But like the more I get into nursing, it just like I can't even watch it because I'm like, and then
it's
like
insulting.
Real, and you're like, you're not like that's not how it looks. Like
yeah.
And then this also reinforces a stereotype of nurses that if people don't really know, like I even asked my dad this, and I said this on the podcast. It's like, do you know what nurses do? And he was like, well, they like bring food and like make beds and they'll take your temperature. Like people and then this just like completely reinforces this idea that nurses are just like there in the background while doctors just float onto the unit and make everything okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I imagine it's kind of like that with, just to bring up like a different field, like dentistry. Cause I know like when dental hygienists come in, they literally do the entire process. Like
the dentist comes in and he just like pokes around in your mouth for 32 seconds and then he's out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree.
That's a good point.
It's actually really funny because throughout this whole like, being in our own world now for the next couple of months where we're kind of like stuck inside our houses, I actually started watching Grey's Anatomy because I was like, you know what, there's so many seasons, like I might as well start. I've heard so much about this show and I'm watching it and I'm like, this can't. And it was really interesting that we had this kind of like session coming up because like there's no way this is accurate because like this is just the amount of like sex and kissing. I'm like, no way you would be able to just like get away with this at work.
The hospital's not a sexy place. I'll tell you that right now.
There's too much going on.
No, you can't even need a break to pee, let alone.
You can't even go pee. And in a quickie.
That's so funny. No. Speaking on that, kind of with the current events of the world, what kind of tips or advice would you guys give just to people maybe that are really dealing with like uncertainty and trying their best to like keep themselves safe and keep their families safe? I know there's kind of been, we've heard a lot from the news of what we should do, but kind of in a nurse's perspective, what kind of advice would you give for people that are going through this?
Well, I think that there's something out on that exists in the world of Instagram and Facebook and the internet. And I'm sure you guys have heard about it, toxic positivity, right? Like everything is going to be okay if you say it will. And it's just very like it. And I think it's important to sort of put that aside and understand that it is okay to be afraid. It is okay to be uncertain, to be anxious. It's okay to be upset that you didn't get to go to your prom or your graduation isn't happening or that, you know, I think that it's okay for people to feel not okay. And from that, you're able to then be like, okay, I'm not okay. What do I need? And then you can seek that in a healthy way, in a good way, instead of suppressing feelings and letting anxiety and fear build would be my advice.
I think a hard thing for me too is being on social media like constantly now. That's all we have to do. Constantly seeing these updates, but also seeing like friends of yours that are constantly working out and being productive and baking things. For me, I'm like, it makes me feel like crap when I haven't done anything all day.
Totally.
Like, it's important to realize like that's fine. Like you're literally
it's okay to do nothing.
Like, you need a day, take a day. Or
I have that same feeling, Haley. Some days I'm just like, I feel like doing nothing. And I feel terrible about it. And you have to like remind yourself, like, we could be here for another 2 months and that's the reality. So if you have a day where you're just like, no, I'm going to snack, I'm going to watch TV in my pajamas that I've been wearing for 2 days. And that's okay.
Use this as a time to reflect on your own emotions and reset and slow down and take that time for yourself, because if you're being given the opportunity to do that, then you might as well use that time. And I think a lot of the feelings of uncertainty and the despair that a lot of people are feeling, like Charlotte and Haley were saying, like it's important to just recognize those feelings, acknowledge them, face them, like don't try to suppress them, and understand that we're all in the same boat. We're all feeling pretty hopeless with the situation going on. We're all feeling powerless, but you can take some of that power back and understand that there are things that you can do to help the situation. And none of us are completely powerless. There are things you can do, like what everyone's talked about in the news, social distancing, hand washing, things like that. And, you know, I saw this really cool quote the other day that was like, you know, healthcare workers, we're not on the front lines. The public, you guys are on the front lines. Because you are ground zero. You are where it's happening. You have the responsibility to stop this in its track. Healthcare workers are the last line of defense, but you are the front lines.
That's a good
So I think people need to take that into account and take some of their power back and understand that they have a lot to do with the situation as well.
Yeah, that's super powerful.
Yeah.
That's a really cool quote. I really like that.
And
What
it's just in adding to what Izzy's saying, just setting boundaries, I think, is important.
Yeah.
A lot of the time we're checking in on family, we're having these conversations with friends and people, and the only thing that we're talking about is this one thing. And I found that for the last 2 weeks, and I finally just have set a boundary to be like, we're going to talk about something else.
Yeah. Only give it a certain amount of time each day.
Yeah. So boundary setting, again, is a great way to just sort of have a piece of power that you can apply to your day-to-day to make it a little bit better, a little bit more positive.
Yeah. And to end it off, Haley, do you have any tips of kind of what you would do in your scenario, or anyone else?
I don't know. I just kind of just like take it day by day. It's nice to like kind of plan things. Like I know like I have a friend group, like we have set FaceTime days. So like every Wednesday and Sunday at 2:30 we FaceTime. So like having something to look forward to, or even like making a good dinner, or like ordering in like from a local restaurant, like it makes days go by quicker. And also like starting like little projects, cleaning, puzzles, I don't know, whatever works for you.
Yeah. I think that's really important. I think it's important also to realize, like, I've seen a lot of posts on Facebook being like, and one of our like mutual friends posted this, and I thought it was very interesting because he was like, if you're not taking this time to be a better person, to be more productive, then you're just wasting an opportunity. I'm like, man, we are literally going through a global crisis, and here you are saying we should bulk up and like lose weight,
be better people.
Yeah, enough of that. Leave me alone.
Yeah. And then I saw, it was really funny, a couple days later, a meme that like scratched out the last part, and it's like, no, you are fine. Like, we are literally going through a crisis. Like, like, so people just need to
be more gentle with themselves, with you know, like just be gentle yourself with others. That's
all you can really do. Totally. Well, I want to thank you, ladies. We only have about a minute left here, so I'm going to sign off here. Thank you again so much for being a part of this. This was actually so much fun, and I really enjoyed getting to know your lives a little bit more, because I know when I talk to Haley, sometimes I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. It's really cool. So it was really great to hear a little bit more. Again, everyone watching, please make sure to check out the Hey Nurse podcast, as they post content more about this. If you want to hear more about the nurse life, more about what nurses go through on a day-to-day basis, check them out. I'm Millie Rouge, and this was the Vienna Whyte Roundtable episode 6 with our lovely nurses-to-be. I want to thank you guys personally for just being who you are and being the profession you are, because I know I could never do it. So I thank you for doing this. Make sure everyone that's watching, you like, subscribe, and hit the bell button so you can be notified when our shows come out. We release shows Monday to Friday. So I'm going to let you ladies sign it off and say your goodbyes, and then we'll be out for the day.
Awesome.
Thanks for having us.
Yes.
It was so much fun.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.